We're fearlessly talking about the biggest stories that matter to you the most. Breaking news, John Calipari is finalizing a 5-year deal to become the Arkansas Razorbacks' next head coach, covering college sports like no one else. The biggest guests in sports. We now welcome in Hall of Famer Jim Calhoun.
Such a pride I had, I came to connect.
The legend, Tim Tebow, joins us.
We'll run it back. I like it.
The legend, Herschel Walker. Welcome in, everybody. Monday afternoon edition, Aaron Torres Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Torres. Hope everybody's doing well. Hope everybody's having a great day. Hope everybody had a great Easter Sunday. I'll be transparent, was planning on doing an Easter Sunday show. Some family stuff obviously popped up. We probably could have done a full Easter show on Sunday and then did a full show on Monday because we have a ton to react to. A loaded Monday Aaron Torres pod. Here's what you need to know. We're going to open, obviously, as we got off air last week, John Calipari announces that basically his entire roster is coming back. What does it mean? Is Arkansas the number one team in the SEC? We are going to discuss that. From there, Kentucky may have picked up its final piece of the 2025-2026 puzzle on Monday. Denzel Aberdeen is a Wildcat. Who is he? What does it mean? I think there's a big thing about Mark Pope's 2025-26 roster that needs to be discussed. We'll talk about that. PJ Haggerty, have you seen that man's request in the transfer portal? Is anybody actually going to take him up on it? We'll discuss a little bit about Ian Jackson of St. John's. And oh, by the way, some major dominoes falling at UConn, my alma mater, so we will discuss all that. Before we get started, a couple quick reminders. One, make sure that you are subscribed to the Aaron Torres Pod YouTube channel. New clips, new videos going up every single day. We really do appreciate everybody's support of the show. If you're not subscribed on YouTube, 55,000 subscribers. We appreciate everybody's support. If you are subscribed on YouTube, find the Apple feed, find the Spotify feed. Producer Matt, you can drop those in the chat as well. Because we are growing. We are setting all sorts of records. By the way, you see the TV monitor behind us. I should mention, if you are a company that is looking to advertise and reach tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people every year, go ahead and reach out to Aaron Torres Podcast Questions at gmail.com. We can throw your logo up there. We are rolling. We are, again, just record-setting numbers. We appreciate everybody's support. But again, that will be for a presenting sponsor once we get through the next couple months here into football. If you work for a beer company, a liquor company, we got so many fans in Kentucky. I know somebody's working at one of those bourbon distilleries. Reach out, Aaron Torres, Podcast Questions at gmail.com. If you want to reach millions, you can advertise with me. You can advertise on this pod. You can advertise on this TV right there. And like I said, the show is available on Apple and Spotify as well. Also, before we get started, one other reminder. Speaking of advertisers, speaking of friends, speaking of products that we love, want to thank our friends, want to thank our partners, and we do want to thank Cauley Puffs and CauleyPuffs.com. Okay, so listen, we've told you about Cauley Puffs, but it is late April into May. It's about to be beach season, jet ski season, lake season, river season, wherever you're spending time on the water and getting a little vitamin D this summer. The bottom line is that summer is coming. You need that summer bod. You need snacks that are both healthy but delicious to get you in shape. You need Cauley Puffs. I've told you the story. It's a family-owned company not far from where I live. Joey, a huge football fan, was sitting on the couch one day and just said, I need a snack that I'm going to like, that my kids are going to like, that is healthy but delicious. I need some alternative to the crap in my grocery aisle. Screw Doritos, screw Fritos, screw all that gross stuff in my grocery aisle. And he came up with Cauley Puffs. Baked, not fried, avocado oil, no grease, healthy ingredients. They are the official snack of producer Matt's snack cabinet, by the way. That is not a paid promo. Matt is just getting them on his own. But I'm telling you, this is the snack that you need to try. For more information, what I need you to do, I need you to visit CauleyPuffs.com. That's CauleyPuffs.com, CauleyPuffs.com. You can also find them on Amazon.com. It's the summer of Cauley Puffs. Cauley Puffs summer, baby. For more information, find them, try them. Amazon, Cauley Puffs. You're going to like them. I promise you. Healthy, delicious Collypuffs.com. With that said, again, I hope everybody had a great Easter. We easily could have done a show on Easter Sunday. We decided to wait till Monday. There is no more time to waste. People, let's get to the topic of the day. Topic of the day, we could actually start in about 7, 8, 10 different places, okay? But where I want to start is news that literally happened about 5 minutes after we went off air on Thursday. And I'll tell you, this is about as long as you're ever going to have to wait for Torres to talk about a topic. We could not record on Thursday night. I had family in town. We were going to do it Sunday. We did not do a show Sunday because of the holiday. So let's go ahead and dive into the roster that John Calipari is going to roll out because, they had some big news on Thursday that we need to discuss. And if you listen to Thursday evening show, what did we spend the first 20 or 25 minutes talking about? We said, look, Calipari made some portal additions early last week. Malik Ewan from Florida State, Nick Pringle from South Carolina. Like them, they're role players. They aren't guys that are going to define Arkansas' season in 2025, 2026. And what I said at the time was there were 4 players that, in theory, had eligibility and could come back, and Arkansas' season next year was going to be defined by if those 4 decided to come back. DJ Wagner, Carter Knox, Billy Richmond, and Trevin Brazile. Well, before we got off air, Carter Knox did announce that he was going to test the NBA draft waters, leave the process open. But we went off air wondering what the future of all 3 was. Unfortunately, about 2 minutes after, I'm not even kidding, it was under 10 minutes after we got off air. Like, it was staggering how wild the time frame was. But less than 5 minutes, 10 minutes after we get off air, the other 3 did make their official announcements in a video released by John Calipari on social. Producer Matt has that video. Producer Matt, tell everybody what they missed on Thursday afternoon.
With the team. And there is a team this year. So let me go over some of the roster. What we're doing, who's going to be here. Not quite finished, but I'm feeling really good about this group.
What's up, Hog Nation? Let's run it back. I'm all in.
Yo, what's good, Razorback Nation? It's TB. Just want to say I'm excited to come back and do another year on the hill. Whoopee.
I'm all in, Razorback Nation. Year 2. Let's do it.
What up, Dog Hog Nation? Darius Acuff here. Just here to let y'all know I'm all in, man. Let's do it.
I just wanted to give a huge shout out to all my Arkansas fans. And I really just wanted to let y'all know, Hog Nation, I'm all in.
Hog Nation, I'm all in. Let's do it.
Hello, Hog Nation. I'm all in.
And on top of that, you read today, Carter is testing the waters, which I fully agree with. That being said,
So there you have it. Just minutes after we went off air, DJ Wagner is back. Trevin Brazile is back. Billy Richmond is back. Carter Knox testing the NBA draft waters. By the way, we know about the portal additions and the 4-man recruiting class. And so with it, I really have 2 questions. One, is this the best team in the SEC coming into next season? We're going to discuss that momentarily. But before we get to that, I do have another question. And that question is very simple. Can anything stop the Big Pig invasion, baby? That is right. Can anything stop the Big Pig invasion? I'll tell you what, we have sold out of our stock, but you can get your orders in. AaronTorresOnline.com/merchandise. My t-shirt guy already has another order coming because it is so exciting. It is that time of year. And like I said, is this the best team in the SEC? I think on paper it is. Let's go ahead and dive in. By the way, as always, Torres on the Hogs for your late-breaking Arkansas news. So a couple things stand out about that video. First of all, I love the top. If you remember, it was right around this time last year, John Calipari officially announces the Arkansas head coach. His first press conference with the media says, and this is an all-time line, I loved it. He says, went to meet with the team. There was no team. And so basically, of course, when Eric Musselman left, everybody entered the portal. So he opens that video with the statement of, we have a team this year, and I'm really excited about it. So I love that callback to his opening press conference. But really, let's go ahead and dive in because to me, this is a best-case scenario. All the guys you wanted are back, and you retained everybody in the high school recruiting class. And I want to go ahead and actually, you know what? I want to start there. By the way, we got a little headphone situation going on here, so forgive me. I apologize, but we'll keep going. But really, so let's talk Arkansas, okay? Because we're going to get into best SEC, whatever. But to me, you know what was actually the biggest thing that stood out to me watching that video? It is that in an off season where everybody is losing guys everywhere, and it's not a knock on this school or that school or whatever, but think about the last couple days. Denzel Aberdeen, one of the best players off of a national championship team at Florida, about to be a starter, enters the portal. Caden Lewis was going to have a big role at Kentucky, decides not to go to Kentucky. This school loses this guy. That school loses that guy. Chad Baker-Bizarro was set to come back to Auburn. He does not come back. That's the biggest thing that stands out. In this kind of offseason, Calipari's bringing back everybody. The three guys that we know are coming back, they all had opportunities to leave. They are coming back. And I think this is important as well, the four-man freshman class. It would have been easy for Malik Thomas or Darius Acuff Jr., two guards that were expecting to play big minutes, to worry about DJ Wagner's back. What does it mean? What does it mean for my opportunities? Am I going to play as much? They could have easily looked at other options. Instead, they are coming back as well. Now let's dive into this team, because to me, it's the best team on paper in the SEC going into next year. By the way, I'll update my way too early top 25 later this week. I updated, I think, Thursday or Friday of last week. It's already outdated. But when I look at this team, a couple things. First of all, I think the backcourt is elite, okay? DJ Wagner, you guys and girls know I'm a fan. You might feel differently. You might like him. You might not like him, whatever. Okay, I get it. But at the end of the day, what I see is this: a third-year point guard in the SEC, and I believe a guy that was playing his best basketball at the end of last season. Okay, we've talked about it time and time again. I know the stats don't blow you away. 11 points, 3.5 assists. But remember, he wasn't even playing on the ball for the first probably 40% of the season before Boogie Flan gets hurt. But then late in the year, when Arkansas needed a superstar, this was the guy, that stepped up. You go to that big win at Rupp Arena that started everything. 17 points, 8 assists in that game. 17 points, 5 assists in a near win at Auburn. Obviously, the game against Mississippi State late in the season that essentially clinched an SEC tournament bid. 24 points, 3 of 4 from behind the three-point arc. 13 points and 6 assists in the SEC tournament. 14 points and 6 assists against Kansas in the opening round of the NCAA tournament. And even though things didn't go as planned against Texas Tech, did have 13 points in that game as well. So to me, first of all, that's the first important part, is the fact that you now have a veteran point guard in college basketball in 2026 in the SEC. I find it interesting, by the way, in an offseason in which Tennessee is basically losing everybody. Auburn is starting from scratch. Florida is starting from scratch. Ole Miss is starting from scratch. Kentucky is returning some, but obviously replacing a lot. John Calipari all of a sudden becomes Mr. Retention, headlined by DJ Wagner. Beyond that, and by the way, I'd say this about DJ. If DJ had wanted to enter the portal, I promise you he would have had options. Veteran point guard, from the tri-state area. I'm here to tell you there were a couple Big East schools that were hoping that kid was going to enter the portal, but he ends up coming back. Beyond that, Billy Richmond, a guy we've talked about a lot. I keep using the analogy. He's like the middle linebacker that, doesn't really know the plays, but he goes hard every play. And sometimes he makes a tackle 8 yards in the backfield. And sometimes he runs into the wrong hole, but darn it, does he play hard? That's a kid that I think is going to make a leap as a sophomore, and another one who played his best basketball late in the season. 16 points, 9 rebounds against St. John's in the NCAA tournament. Arkansas doesn't go to the Sweet 16 without him. Trevin Brazile. I'm here to tell you, Trevin Brazile, if he had entered the portal, would have had plenty of options. I know that statistically the numbers don't stand out, but if you watched Arkansas late in the year, 15 points and 11 boards against Ole Miss in the SEC tournament, 11 points and 12 rebounds against Kansas, 11 points and 5 boards against Texas Tech. You add those guys in with the 2 veterans that you added in the front court, Nick Pringle and Malik Ewan. We talked about that last week. Oh, who cares? They're a bunch of role players. You didn't need superstars in the portal. It's actually a great thing because you can't add too much more. And then I'll tell you this. I am so excited about the 2 freshmen that are coming in with Darius Acuff and Malik Thomas. Did you watch Darius Acuff in the Nike Hoop Summit a few nights ago? 22 points in that game. What do you have? 7, 8 assists. Looked every bit. Listen, DeBansa and Darren Peterson are going 1 and 2 in the next year's draft, okay? If Nate Amen, who finally committed, if things go well, he could be a top 5 pick. You know, some of these guys that could return, like a Carter Knox, could go high. I'm here to tell you, Darius Acuff is going to be one of the top 10 players off the board next year. He is going to be Arkansas's best NBA prospect, and I think he is going to be a huge addition alongside DJ Wagner. Malik Thomas is going to be really good as well. And so I just bring it up because I asked the question to lead the segment. Is this the best team in the SEC? And yes, I believe they are. Now, again, games have to be played. You have to figure things out. You have to figure out rotations. By the way, the other thing I'd say, we don't know about Carter Knox coming back. I do still think Carter Knox, by the way, is an important piece to what they want to do in 2025, 2026. They do need wing scoring. They do need defense on the wing. But what I would also say is you go back to what we've discussed throughout the offseason is that that's a kid that if he doesn't get some type of great guarantee in the draft process, then guess what? He comes back and he's potentially an All-American. He's potentially a top 15 pick in the 2025-2026 NBA draft or 2026 NBA draft, excuse me. Because again, if you look at what he did, if you look at the impact that he had late in the season, we've talked a lot about him. He showed up in a big way against Texas Tech in the NCAA tournament. 20.6 boards, 15 points against St. John's, 14 points against Ole Miss in the SEC tournament. But you start to look at adding him. Tell me what this team's weakness is. Now, you probably have to add a little bit of shooting, and we'll get to that in a minute. But all of a sudden, you look around. You have size. You have athleticism. You have role players in the front court. You have 3 guards that can get you probably 20 to 25 on any given night. You have a wing in Carter Knox, which could be a top 10 pick. You have Billy Richmond, who I think is going to be a much improved, confident player in year 2 in the SEC. They have experience. They have retention, which, again, I think is important. You know, I saw a stat from Evan Mia from evanmia.com who said something to the effect of, you know, Florida's retention was quietly among the best in college basketball last year. And we don't think about these kind of things in April. We get so excited about the portal and this 5 stars going there. Having guys who have been there, who have done it, who understand expectations, I think that is a huge part of what you need in this world in college basketball. And so I could go on, but I really do believe this is the best roster. Headlined by the 3 returnees, DJ Wagner, Billy Richmond, Trevin Brazile. Love the 2 5-star guards, Malik Thomas, Darius Acuff, and a couple other things that are worth mentioning. One, I think it's important to note, when I talk about the best team in the SEC, again, we'll figure out who the best teams are when the games get played in January, February, March. But at the same time, like I said, I think it's an important note. The SEC, it's always going to be good in the NIL portal era. But this past year might have been the peak of what it can be. It's just hard to imagine it being better in a world where we don't have 5th and 6th year seniors with that COVID year of eligibility. Again, Tennessee rebuilding its roster almost completely from scratch. Auburn rebuilding its roster almost completely from scratch, especially now that we know that Chad Baker-Mazara almost certainly isn't going to be back. Ole Miss rebuilding from scratch. Florida rebuilding from scratch. I was thinking about this. Outside of Kentucky, who I think is going to be improved, outside of Arkansas, because this is an Arkansas segment, but outside of Kentucky, who I do think is going to be improved, and outside of maybe Texas, because I think Sean Miller is just a way better coach than Rodney Terry, who are the teams in the SEC that are going to be definitively better next year than they were this year? I don't think Auburn's going to be better. They're going to be good. I don't think they're going to be better. I think Florida's going to be good. I don't think they're going to be better. I don't think whoever, Tennessee, Mississippi State, you go on and on. Missouri, I love Dennis Gates. I don't think they're going to be better. So this is an exciting time for Arkansas. The last thing I'll say is I don't think they're done. One, we'll wait on official news for Carter Knox. That probably won't come out for another probably 3 to 4 weeks. NBA draft process is going to go into mid-May. We'll cover it. We'll monitor it. And it'll be interesting if for some reason Carter Knox does decide to stay in the draft. We'll obviously figure out, is there a plan B behind him? Because I don't know that you'll be able to get that caliber of player that late in the spring. But again, I expect him to probably return to college after this draft process, because he is a guy that I don't see being a top 15, top 20 pick and getting the kind of guaranteed money that he should be expecting, and the kind of guaranteed money that should convince him to leave Arkansas next year when he's going to be a very well compensated player in the college game. But two, I don't think they're done, and it'll be interesting to see. I think they still feel like they want to go get one more scorer on the perimeter, a guy that doesn't need to handle the ball. So could that be PJ Haggerty if the point guard demands go away? We'll talk about PJ Haggerty in a minute. Jameer Watkins from Florida State is a name that is very popular. Then I'll say this, there's conflicting reports on if Chad Baker-Mazara would actually be a factor at Arkansas. I saw Jeff Goodman say he would be. I saw some Arkansas reporters say probably not. But I'm here to tell you, and I'm sure all the comments agree with me, all those lovely Kentucky fans agree. I think this is the best team in the SEC going into next year. We got a long way to go to get to November and December, but I cannot wait until the games are played. And by the way, we'll find out how good Arkansas is early. We know Coach Cal will put together an interesting out-of-conference schedule, and we already know Thanksgiving Day, Duke, Arkansas in Chicago. That's probably going to be a top 10 matchup. At least it will be a preseason top 10 matchup on paper. So a lot to be excited about. But this team right now is, in my opinion, the best team in the SEC. So what we're going to do, we're going to take a quick break, come back, answer some of your questions. We'll always prioritize Super Chat, so drop a Super Chat if you want your voice heard. We'll get to some questions. Then we'll come back. Wasn't just a busy day for John Calipari in Arkansas. Also a busy day for Mark Pope. Did you see what Mark Pope did on Monday? A quietly impressive move. I think it says something big picture about where Kentucky is going in 25-26. We'll take a quick break. We'll be right back. All right, we're going to get back to the show in a minute, but before we do, many of you ask me all the time, Torres, what can I do to help support the show? You give me hours and hours and hours of content every single week. What can I do to help you? Well, I'll tell you what. Do me a quick favor. Check out the Aaron Torres Media merchandise store for all of your team-specific shirts, hats, and more. All available at aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. A lot of you wondering, Torres, what can I get in that merch store? Well, first of all, we got our brand new Hope and Pope Kentucky basketball t-shirts. That's right. Mark Pope has arrived. He is here to save the day. Get your Hope and Pope t-shirts there. Also, Arkansas fans, the Big Pig Invasion is here. You can get your tees there. Basketball School Alabama shirts. Maura Hurley 2024 UConn shirts for your tailgates at Rentschler Field, your games at the XL Center or Gamble. And oh, by the way, your Mike effing Woodson gear for Indiana. If you love football, we got you covered too. We got more Dion shirts and hats than we even know what to do with. The freeze warning has hit the plains. Auburn fans, grab your freeze warning tees now. And of course, our new era, new rules shirt applies to Nebraska football and its incredible fan base. We have more coming for the fall, plenty in stock right now. So make sure to check out the Aaron Torres Media merch store at aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. And you can always hit me up with any questions. Aaron Torres Podcast question. All right, everybody. I'm back. Good to be back. So do want to switch gears. By the way, I see nobody saying that I'm sniffling. If I feel 1,000% better than I did last Thursday. So I appreciate everybody's concerns. Producer Matt is feeling better as well. Tough couple days after the Final Four. But you know who hasn't been a tough couple days for? Mark Pope and the Kentucky Wildcats. Okay, so we've talked, obviously. Listen, first of all, we've come full circle on Mark Pope. Okay, so first of all, let me say this. I had a bunch of people in the comments today on Twitter. Torres, you're the guy that said Pope can't land anybody. Listen to the segment that I did at the Final Four. There was a question on a thumbnail that said time to panic or cause for concern or something. But if you listen to the video that I did at the Final Four, I said, take a deep breath, Kentucky fans. Kentucky is always going to get their guys. Well, they got another one on Monday, and it might, in fact, be the final guy that they get of major influence and major significance this offseason, as on Monday, Denzel Aberdeen, the sixth man of the Florida Gators national championship team, he went in the portal on Friday. By Monday, he is officially a Kentucky Wildcat. Big move, big addition. I love this addition. Love what it says about the 25-26 Kentucky Wildcats. And by the way, let me say this. I think it says something very definitive about what Mark Pope wants to do this offseason and what he wants his 25-26 roster to look like. So let's go ahead and dive in. As always, make sure you follow our Torres on UK page. That is for all of your late-breaking Kentucky news. Shout out to Mark, our intern who runs it, helps me run it as well. Also, obviously, as always, our Hope and Pope t-shirts at AaronTorresOnline.com/merchandise. All right, so Denzel Aberdeen, really interesting player. He was actually a very, if you're like a real college basketball diehard, and if you're watching this show in April, you are. He was a guy that if you watch Florida, everybody loved Walter Clayton, and with good reason. Will Richard, Elijah Martin. Every time Denzel Aberdeen came in, good things happened. Finishes the season as the team's sixth man, 7.5 points per game, 35% three-point shooting. Couple things. One, when you actually watch the games, I think it was pretty obvious that basically he was actually, like for basically anyone else in college basketball, he could have started. They had 3 fifth-year seniors. One of them is going to be a top 15 pick in the NBA draft in Walter Clayton. The other 2 were very good college guards. I think they could get a cup of coffee in the NBA. But 2, the other thing was when Denzel Aberdeen was thrown into the fire as a starter, he was a very good player. 14.5 points per game, 41% three-point shooting in games in which he was a starter. So just because he wasn't technically a starter all season, just because he didn't play starters minutes, doesn't mean that he's not capable. And that, to me, is what stands out about this edition. Now, it's funny, by the way, I'll say this really quick. I saw a lot of negativity about him even entering the portal. How can he leave? He's going to be a starter, reigning national champs. He's from Florida. Listen, this is the new world. And I think what's important to note, Denzel Aberdeen is a very good player that was very in demand and probably not an NBA player, though. And so, like, for me, I don't have a problem with him entering the portal because next year he can make literal life-changing money, and it might be the best money that he ever makes the rest of his career. So I had no problem with him entering, but I do think that he is a better guard that he's being given credit for. Again, 7.5 points per game, 35% shooting doesn't stand out, but 14.5 points per game, 41% shooting from 3 in games that he started. He is a very good player. I'm here to tell you, like I said, if he went to probably 350 of 360 other schools, he would have started. He would have put up big minutes. He just so happened to be playing in probably the most loaded backcourt in college basketball. Because of that, I'll also say this. I think there's a misconception about Denzel Aberdeen and the role that he will have at Kentucky. I've seen a lot of people say, why are you leaving to be a sixth man at Kentucky or this or that or the other thing? I don't think he's going to be a sixth man. I think when I look at Kentucky, it's very clear to me how Mark Pope wants to use his backcourt. Assuming Otega Oweh comes back, here's what I think the plan is. I think the plan is Jalen Lowe at point guard. Of course, that's the point guard who was at Pitt, 17.5 points per game, 5.5 assists per game. That's going to be your point guard. I don't think that's a surprise. Otega Oweh, your best player this year from start to finish, no injuries, was reliable. He's testing the NBA draft process, but my assumption right now is as good as he is as a college player, he will be back and playing college basketball next year. He's going to, frankly, make more money playing in college next year than he would have. He's going to be one of your guards. And then I think Denzel Aberdeen is going to be in the backcourt as well. Mark Pope is probably going to start 3 guys in the backcourt. You know what that reminds me of? How about this year when he did the exact same thing? It was Lamont Butler, Otega Oweh, and Jackson Robinson for most of the season. Kobe Brea got a few starts late. There were some other guys that kind of came in and out of the lineup. And then I think at the 4-5 spot, what you're going to have is probably to start the year, if Jaden Quaintance isn't ready to go, Mo Diabate from Alabama will be your starting 4, and Brandon Garrison will be your starting 5. And then when Jaden Quaintance comes back, you either move Mo Diabate to the bench or you move Brandon Garrison to the bench, and Jaden Quaintance, when he's healthy, he will then be your starting 5 or your starting 4-man. A couple things on Jaden Quaintance. I know this is a Denzel Aberdeen segment, but one, I know that one thing from the Quaintance camp was that I don't think that they thought he was just a 5-man. In other words, I think at Arizona State, and we've talked about this, they felt like he got thrown into the post, park your butt down there, offensive rebound, whatever. And I think they feel like he has a lot more to show off in his skill set. So I believe that he will be playing more minutes at the 4 than maybe he did at Arizona State. Doesn't mean he can't play at the 5. And I actually think you can play him and Brandon Garrison together. Now, he's got to prove that he can do it game after game after game. That's after proving that he's healthy. But then also, if you want to go small, you could play Mo Diabate at the 5, probably start Jaden Quaintance at the 4, and or Jaden Quaintance at the 5, and have Brandon Garrison come off the bench. And so to me, I don't think Denzel Aberdeen is going anywhere to be the 6th man. He was the 6th man last year. I think he's going to start at Kentucky, and I think he's going to contribute and play right away. What this says, though, and this to me is the important part, okay, because I think there's a bigger picture story and a bigger picture narrative about Kentucky basketball and about what Mark Pope wants to do with his second roster, wanted to do, and now has successfully done. What this says to me is very clearly this, is that Mark Pope this past year realized that as skilled as that Kentucky team was, it simply was not athletic enough. It needed to get more athletic. It needed to get bigger. It needed to get more physical. And most importantly, like I said, it needed to be more athletic. And I think to the credit of Mark Pope, Hope and Pope, baby, he came through and he delivered, okay? And so you look at the situation with Kentucky last year. Listen, it was a great story. By the way, say whatever you want about me. I said in the preseason, this notion that they weren't a top 25 team, I was like, this is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. I said Kentucky is going to be a top 25 team. They're better than people are giving them credit for, okay? And it was basically based mostly on skill. Mark Pope kind of brought that BYU system, that BYU offense with him. And basically, listen, I think part of it was he wanted to do kind of the opposite of what the previous coaching staff had done. He wanted to get older. He wanted veterans. He wanted grown-ups. He wanted guys that he knew could handle the stage of Kentucky. And so he did it. He added Jackson Robinson. He added Kobe Brea. He added Andrew Carr. He added this guy, that guy, whatever. But then what I think happened by the end of the year, you get an injury or two, and all of a sudden, you realize skill only gets you so far, right? Lamont Butler, to his credit, was basically playing the second half of the year with one shoulder. You feel awful for Lamont that his career couldn't have ended better and on a more healthy note. But at the same time, he's kind of not the guy that you thought he was. He wasn't the guy that he was in December and January by the end of the year just because of the injuries. That's not a knock on him. It's just a reality. Jackson Robinson is out. Now, all of a sudden, again, a Kobe Brea, who you were hoping to be your 6th guy, shoots threes off the bench. Now he's got to play starters minutes. Now a guy like Trent Noah, a guy like Colin Chandler, they have to play more minutes than you were expecting. And you could just see by the end of the year, Kentucky just didn't have the horses. They just didn't have the dudes to compete with the best teams in college basketball. Alabama in the SEC tournament, it wasn't close, and we know it. And it's okay. It's not a knock because you were playing a bunch of guys that you didn't want to play. Also, Tennessee, I know you beat them twice in the regular season. You get to the NCAA tournament, they were just so much more athletic and physical than the Wildcats were. It's not a knock. It's just a reality. And so I think what Mark Pope very much prioritized, and we've talked about it all offseason, we need dudes. We need alphas. We need dudes that when stuff goes wrong, when things aren't perfect, when the play isn't executed flawlessly, that can just go make stuff happen, right? Mo Diabate is a guy that can just get you 2 offensive rebounds on a given possession and make stuff happen. And, you know, he's not going to get pushed around. He's not going to get shoved around. He's crazy athletic. He's done it in the SEC. Jalen Lowe is a guy that can get you a bucket, can get somebody else a bucket. You look at the guy they just added today, Denzel Aberdeen. He's a guy, 41% three-point shooter in his starts, but also a guy that is a great finisher at the rim, and you know he's not intimidated by big moments. He only had 7 points in the national championship game, but he carried Florida for a big stretch of that national championship game during that, you know, when Florida was struggling. Will Richard was great in the first half. Denzel Aberdeen was a big part of a second half run that they had to put them in position to eventually win that game against Houston. And so when I look at Kentucky, I give Mark Pope credit because clearly there has been a plan going into this offseason. We're going to trade a little bit of skill for a little bit of for a lot of bit of athleticism. And eventually we're just going to believe that our dudes can take over games late when things don't go perfectly. And so it's interesting because I look at the additions via the portal, 5 total additions, right? What stands out to me? 4 of them have major power conference experience. Mo Diabate at Alabama, Jaden Quaintance at ASU. You also have Denzel Aberdeen, who of course comes from Florida. You have Jalen Lowe, who comes from Pitt. Those are 4 dudes out of the 5. Cam Williams, by the way, is clearly a high major player that has NBA draft potential long term. But you add 4 dudes who clearly have high major athleticism, size, skill, toughness, with Otega Owe and Brandon Garrison, 2 guys who came from the power conference level who played with you last year. And then, oh, by the way, now Jasper Johnson, a top 25 prospect, a top 15 prospect, a guy that, was a 5-star. Now he doesn't have to be a superstar, but he's going to add some more. Malachi Moreno is going to add more. That's on top of the other guys. So if you're a Kentucky fan, I think you should actually be really excited about this team, because it reminds me a lot of last offseason, right? I remember when Ansley Almanor committed, and I remember when Andrew Carr committed, and it's like, well, Ansley Almanor, he only had this offer, he only had that offer, and it's like, yeah, but Mark Pope is building a team with pieces that fit and with intention, and it's clear that he's doing the same. I love the addition of Denzel Aberdeen. It's going to be a fun year with Kentucky. I just said it a minute ago with Arkansas. Cannot wait to see what this roster looks like in the 2025-2026 season. By the way, producer Matt, you might as well pop up the Matt Norlander tweet from earlier in the day, because I do think this is an important note to kind of put a bow on this conversation. Norlander, who is very close with the staff, I think Cody Feger is his guy, said, quote, barring any portal defections, Kentucky has ended its pursuit of all other portal targets. Sources told CBS Sports getting Denzel Aberdeen means they're moving off of Andrei Stojakovic, who we're going to talk about in a minute, Rylan Griffin. Otega Owe is going through the draft process, but I expect him to come back to Lexington. So basically, assuming we get no crazy portal defections, assuming that the 2 remaining 5-star commits in the class of 2025, Malachi Moreno and Jasper Johnson, come back, remember, there is expectation that this is the end for Mark Pope. Tell you what, shout out to Mark Pope. I saw this from my buddy Brandon Ramsey from KSR. Mark Pope getting his first commitment as a Kentucky coach April 21st of 2024, put together the rest of the roster from there. He got maybe his final commitment of the 25-26 roster also on April 21st. So Mark Pope, take off May, go find a beach, enjoy yourself, my man. By the way, the same goes for Coach Cal. I think a lot of these guys that had to put together a roster on a fly last year are largely done. Mark Pope, man, go find a beach. You deserve it, because you have been, to the wall since you took the job April 13th of last year. Gets his first commitment last year on April 21st, gets the last one on April 21st of 2025 for next year's roster. By the way, for people who are just joining us, TV in the background, if you are an advertiser, if you want your product shown on, we're going to reach millions of people this year. We actually have already reached millions of people, millions more. Make sure to reach out to me, Aaron Torres, podcastquestions@gmail.com. Let's talk. We should be getting your logo on that TV right behind me. One more portal conversation from the weekend, and then I want to get to 2 Big East related topics. But there was a portal topic that I do want to get to before we take another break. And let me say this. If you listen to Thursday's show, we did a big segment about a slew of guys who hit the portal on late Thursday afternoon. Andrei Stojakovic from Cal, also Chad Baker-Mazara, and we also talked about PJ Haggerty, the guard from Memphis, okay? And so it was interesting, because if you listen to the show on Thursday, we talked a little bit about PJ Haggerty, and I kind of hinted at something that kind of became a report as far as what PJ Haggerty might be requesting via the transfer portal now that he entered. Producer Matt, why don't you play the sound of me talking about PJ Haggerty on last Thursday's Aaron Torres pod right after he entered the portal? As far as opportunities, I'll say this. The first thing I can tell you, be ready to break out the checkbook, okay? Just be, because every fan base is like, oh, we're going to get him. Dude, no, he's our guy. He's our guy. He's going to. I will tell you this. I had 2 separate people tell me this on Thursday. So remember that report from about 2.5 weeks ago, JT Toppin, Big 12 Player of the Year, decides not even to test the NBA draft waters, and he decides that he's going to come back to college basketball and play for Texas Tech. And we saw the report that he was reportedly getting paid about $4 million over the course of next season at Texas Tech. Well, I bring it up. I had multiple people tell me, you want PJ Haggerty, He's looking for that Texas Tech money. Let me put it this way. When FedEx is out of money and they can't pay you, that means. All right, so I didn't officially say, because I re-listened to it over the weekend, I did not officially say that PJ Haggerty was asking for $4 million. But what I said was he's asking for that JT Toppin money. And basically what he said was, well, wait a second now. JT Toppin, kind of a second, third team All-American type guy, Big 12 player of the year. Texas Tech reportedly was set to pay him $4 million a year. And PJ Haggerty basically said, well, wait a second now. I averaged 21 points per game. I was a second team AP All-American. If JT Toppin's getting $4 million, I want $4 million as well. So I didn't technically say $4 million, but I kind of hinted it was going to be somewhere close. Well, I bring it up because producer Matt, you could throw up the Jeff Goodman tweet from Friday because we got a little bit more clarity. Goodman basically saying exactly what I said. Memphis transfer PJ Haggerty's camp is asking for $4 million plus. Then here's the kicker. And for him to spend the majority of his time at point guard, sources involved in the recruitment told the field of 68. So I'll be real. I heard the $4 million price tag. I did not hear personally the demand to play point guard. I think it makes this a fascinating recruitment. So let's go ahead and discuss it, okay? So first of all, I think what becomes interesting about this recruitment, by the way, as always, CBB transfers on Twitter, CBB transfers on Instagram. Portal closes this week, but we are going to cover this until everybody of note is committed. CBB transfers on Instagram and Twitter. So with Haggerty, what I think becomes interesting about this recruitment, I actually think the part that I think most people find the most interesting is actually the less interesting part. What do I mean by that? What I mean is that if it was only about the $4 million price tag, I actually think that's sort of doable. It sounds crazy. And you're going to sit there and say, wait a second, Torres, Tennessee wouldn't give Nico Iamaleava $4 million to play quarterback, but somebody's going to give PJ Haggerty $4 million to play for their college basketball team. That makes no sense. Well, I'm here to tell you, different sport with different kind of expectations and requirement. And with PJ Haggerty, there's a couple things here. One, the going rate for really good All-American type players is about $3 to $4 million. It just is. JT Toppin's at $4 million. Some of these freshmen, I think AJ DeBonsa is well over $4 million. I don't think he's at the 7 that was reported, but I think he's probably at about $4 million. Donovan Dent, we believe, was about a $3 million a year player. So if those guys are worth that much, I don't think it's crazy for PJ Haggerty to get 4, especially because, as we keep talking about, there are so many teams that still need difference-making players. We keep talking about this, but it's so important. You have a bunch of really good schools that have had a ton of success, that lost a ton of players and have a ton of holes still to fill, and the portal's about to close. There aren't those impact difference makers still in the portal. Think about it. Florida had 4 guards that they were relying on last year. 3 of them graduated. 1 of them just transferred in Denzel Aberdeen. They've added Xavier Lee, and that's really about it. Florida needs players. Ole Miss needs a whole bunch of players, and Chris Beard, I'm here to tell you, I've been covering Chris Beard's career. He ain't going into next year and just saying, okay, we were really good last year. We made a Sweet 16. It's okay if we punt on 2025, 2026, okay? That's not happening. Auburn obviously has added a couple really nice pieces the last couple days. Elijah Freeman. They've added, who am I blanking on? The Kevin Overton. They've added some really nice pieces. They still probably need a guy or 2 for their backcourt. Tennessee, I know they added Nate Ament. They need another guy in their backcourt. Kansas with Darren Peterson. They need more guys. Just trust me, they do. Darren Peterson can't do it all by himself, okay? Where it gets interesting. So the point I guess I'm trying to make, they will get their money. Maybe not $4 million on the dot. They will get money because, again, there are teams that need players, and the demand for great talent does not meet the supply that is going to be available. But where it gets complicated, I cannot emphasize this enough. PJ Haggerty ain't a point guard, okay? Listen, I love the player. He's very talented. He's 6'3", and to a degree, I understand the idea of him asking to be your starting point guard because he's 6'3". He's got 1 year of eligibility left. No, he might have 2, but he's 6'3". If he's ever going to play a minute in the NBA, he's going to have to be your primary ball handler. He's going to have to be your point guard. The problem becomes, and it's pretty straightforward, that ain't what he is. And two, that takes away what he does best. So think about it. If PJ Haggerty comes in and plays point guard, not only are you paying him a crap ton of money, but also he ain't a point guard. Yes, he averaged 3.7 assists per game this year. He also averaged 3.3 turnovers per game this year. That's not his game. His game is attacking the basket, getting to the foul line. He led the nation in free throw attempts, I believe. If not, he was in the very short conversation. But two, here's the other thing. When he's playing point guard, when he's setting up other people, that's taking away what he does best, which again is getting to the basket and putting the ball in the basket to the tune of 21.5 points per game last year. So I just bring it up because listen, I don't have a problem with anybody asking for anything, but you have to be willing to adjust in negotiations, and you have to be willing for somebody to be like, oh no, that's not who you are. That's not what you do well. And we'll pay you to be you, but we're not going to pay you to be somebody else. It's like Nico Iamaleava. You know, Nico, he's allowed to ask for $4 million, but if you don't get $4 million, you better be ready to either take whatever Tennessee wants to give you or go somewhere else. It was a disastrous negotiation for Nico. I don't think it's going to be for PJ Haggerty, but that's why I keep bringing it up, because to me, this is where it gets very interesting if you're PJ Haggerty, and very interesting if you're a team recruiting him. If he's not going to budge off this point guard thing, I actually don't think the market is that good. If he is willing to budge off the point guard thing, then I think he's going to get close to $4 million somewhere else. And so ultimately, I'll say this. I don't want to say it's early because you just never know what, sometimes guys go in the portal, they commit ASAP. Denzel Aberdeen enters on Friday. He's committed Monday morning. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer. And so to me, I think you're going to have to sort through all this if you're PJ Haggerty. Maybe you have to go back hat in hand to a school or two that you said, we're only doing this if I'm a point guard. You might have to go back and say, okay, we still want that $3.5-4 million that you offered us, and we're willing to listen if you're not a point guard. And the one thing I will say, if he's willing to not be a point guard, like I said, I think there are spots for him. Darren Peterson needs help at Kansas. We talked about last week, Tyron Stokes visited Kansas this weekend. I think he is going to reclassify eventually. Kansas needs help around Darren Peterson besides Flory Badunga. Ole Miss needs just everything. PJ Haggerty played at Memphis. Memphis and Ole Miss are right down the street from each other. I'll say this. I mentioned it in the Arkansas segment. I think Arkansas still feels like they need more help in the backcourt with scoring, and that they maybe don't have enough right now. But they don't need a point guard. I'll tell you, they got DJ Wagner. They got Darius Acuff. They got Malik Thomas. They don't need another guy that needs the ball in his hands to be a difference maker. And so if PJ Haggerty wants to be a point guard, they're off the board. If PJ Haggerty is willing to play off the ball, maybe Arkansas is in the mix. I said Ole Miss. I still think Florida needs players, and I'm telling you, Todd Golden just got a taste of that sweet, sweet Final Four juice. Got a taste of the podium on Monday night. You think he wants to go into next year with a team that's, a fringe NCAA tournament team? I don't think so. So I could go on and on. The point has been made. PJ Haggerty is a fascinating case of what goes on in the portal, what are realistic expectations, what is not. Because if this kid decides to stay in the portal and he's willing to get off the point guard stuff, I think he has a huge, huge, huge market. Even, yes, it's late in the portal cycle, but teams have money to burn and they need difference makers, but not at the point guard position, not for that guy. All right, so what we're going to do, take a quick break, come back. When we do, two quick Big East topics. Rick Pitino does it again. Ian Jackson is a member of St. John's 2025-2026 team. Also, some interesting dominoes at UConn. They lost a 5-star this weekend. Alex Karaban, what's his future? Quick break. Be right back.
What's up, everybody? It's AT, and listen, long day of podcasting. Sometimes don't always look the best. So look at this. It's a little bit not great, okay? Well, here is the great news. The great people at Firebox said, Torres, you're a professional. You just got 50,000 subscribers on YouTube. You need to look better. And so they sent me a couple awesome things. I want to pull them out for you right now. This is all from the winter collection, by the way. Spring collection is coming out. We got the vest, very, very, very nice. The sweater, very professional for when I go to professional events. We got these nice blue jeans. I think the question now everybody's asking is, Torres, how do you actually look when you put that stuff on? Let's find out. Well, what do you think? Sweater fits perfectly. Great for all occasions. When I go to games, when I go out to a dinner, warm weather, cool weather, it's perfect. Speaking of perfect, these jeans are phenomenal. Great for games, great for social events. oh, by the way, a little bit stretchy if those New Year's resolutions aren't going on as planned. Really quickly, we got to try. Let's try out the vest. It fits perfectly, not a surprise. So here's the deal. If you want to look as good as Torres, this is what I need you to do. I need you to go to fioboc.com. That's FIOBOC. Fioboc.com. And here's the best part. For listeners to the Aaron Torres pod, you get 20% off with code Torres20 at checkout. We also put a referral link in all of our YouTube videos. Thank you to Fioboc. By the way, make sure you're following them on social media at FIOBOC. Thank you to Fioboc. You want to look as good as Torres, check them out. Again, promo code Torres20.
All right, everybody. I'm back. Gonna be back. Final segment of the show. So good to be back. First of all, thank you to Fioboc. They actually sent me some new stuff right before the Final Four. We'll get you an updated video, maybe with a little bit better sound here in just a minute. Speaking of advertisers, you see this TV behind me here. If you are a beer company, a Kentucky bourbon company, and you want your logo, you want your product reaching millions. I mean, we've reached over 1 million people since the start of March Madness, okay? So March 1 to now, we've reached well over 1 million people. If you want your product, make sure, if you want your product exposed to millions, make sure to reach out, Aaron Torres Podcast Questions at gmail.com. Aaron Torres Podcast Questions at gmail.com. All right, let's go ahead and wrap the show. 2 topics from the Big East. The first one we'll get to. Second one is a little bit up in the air, subject to change, so we'll monitor that one. I'm just trying to monitor social media right now, make sure I didn't miss anything big here over the last couple hours or the last hour or so since we've gone on air. But let's go ahead and wrap the show. First of all, it's funny. I just mentioned March Madness. I just mentioned, the fact that we were in San Antonio, all that great stuff. And I bring it up because one of the last, later-ish portal additions that was made in late March, early April, was actually early April, was Ian Jackson entering the transfer portal the night of the national championship game. Okay. Incredible moment in time where Ian Jackson decides that about 3 hours before the title game, he's going to enter the portal. Producer Matt and I were out with Drew, our Torres on SJU page guy. We're out to lunch in San Antonio. Next thing you know, Ian Jackson is in the portal. So he goes in the portal the night of the national championship game. On this show, we said, listen, St. John's makes the most sense. We'll explain why in a minute. Well, I bring it up because it took 2 weeks, probably about 10 days or so longer than St. John's fans would have hoped for. But Ian Jackson did officially on Monday afternoon commit to the St. John's Red Storm. Listen, I think you can argue biggest commitment of Rick Pitino's time at St. John's. You could certainly argue from a pedigree perspective. He was, listen, they just, RJ Lewis was the Big East Player of the Year. Kadari Richmond is incredible. Zuby Ejiofor turned into something great. But as far as pedigree, as far as importance, as far as significance, Ian Jackson, right there is it. And you know what I got to say to that? Some Big Rick energy right there, man. That's some Big Rick energy. Make sure you get your Big Rick energy tees, AaronTorresOnline.com/merchandise. We also, like I said, we have our Torres on SJU page. Intern Drew does an amazing job running that. Torres on SJU and Big Rick energy. All right. Let's go ahead and dive in. Ian Jackson. Listen, first of all, a couple things here. One, like I said, this is maybe the least surprising, really big piece of portal news that we've gotten here over the course of the offseason. One, I remember the week that Rick Pitino got the St. John's job in the spring of 2023. Ian Jackson was in his junior year, already committed to North Carolina. And immediately, St. John, it becomes this story of, can Rick Pitino flip Ian Jackson? I think he got the job on like a Thursday or a Friday, and that Monday, he was at Ian Jackson's high school watching them practice, okay? And so from the moment Rick Pitino got that job, it was always a question, can he get him to flip? Can he get him to flip? I remember doing a video that spring. It does not happen, but Ian Jackson is from New York. It always felt like this was where it could end up. And the other thing was, St. John's just needed guards this offseason, and so it made perfect sense when he entered the portal. As far as what St. John's is going to get, listen, I know that Ian Jackson's a little bit of a polarizing player. I'm here to say, look, I understand he was a McDonald's All-American, top 10 prospect in his high school class. And so when you're not a one and done, when you're not Cooper Flagg, when you're not what we think AJ DeBonsa is going to be or whatever that everybody wants to criticize, I thought he was pretty good as a freshman in college basketball this past year. I know he struggled late, but again, we've talked about it. The middle of the season, he was as good as any guard in the ACC. 24 points against UCLA, 23 points against Louisville, 27 against Notre Dame, 21 against NC State, 23 at Syracuse. Did struggle down the stretch, but ended up averaging 11.5 points per game, ended up averaging 41% shooting from behind the three-point arc, again, or 39% shooting from the three-point arc, Not great, but still very good, and especially very good for a freshman in a power conference. Now, what becomes interesting about Ian Jackson's commitment is that he played off the ball at North Carolina, where Elliot Cadeau is the starting point guard. Elliot Cadeau, of course, is now at Michigan, neither here nor there. But I bring it up because that ain't going to be the case at St. John's. It was actually very interesting in the press release from Rick Pitino, because this is now official, school announced it and everything. Let's see what Rick Pitino had to say about Ian Jackson. This quote from Adam Zagoria. Adam Zagoria pulled the quote, but it was on the press release. Rick Pitino says, "We had big shoes to fill at the point guard position. Kadari Richmond and Davion Smith were awesome. The ball is now in the hands of our next great point guard. Let's go, Ian." So what I can tell you about the Ian Jackson situation is two things. One, this was not the plan from St. John's. The St. John's has known basically since the week the portal opened, they were going to need guard help. They get Josan Sanan right away. We'll talk about him in a minute. Bryce Hopkins right away. Zuby Ejiofor coming back. They knew they were going to need help. And the plan was, let's get a lead guard and let's have Ian Jackson play off the ball. If you remember, Xavier Lee, the point guard who is now committed to Florida, took a visit right around the time of Ian Jackson. St. John's was hoping to get a commitment from both. They would have taken a commitment from both. I mentioned earlier in the show, DJ Wagner, there was talk for a long time that he was going to at one point enter the portal this offseason. He does not. St. John's would have been a logical landing spot. There were some other guys, I'm not going to name names because the portal technically is still open, that if they had entered the portal, I know St. John's would have been aggressive with. But they don't enter. And so now Ian Jackson is going to be your lead guard. But what I would also say is just because this wasn't necessarily the primary plan doesn't mean that it cannot work. Ian Jackson was not asked to be a point guard at North Carolina this year, but it doesn't mean that he's not capable of it. And oh, by the way, you look at what St. John's did this year. Kadari Richmond was a point guard. He was also a great scorer. He was a guy that, yes, he set other people up, but he also was a guy that was a difference maker when he was attacking the rim as well. And so do I trust that if Rick Pitino believes he can turn Ian Jackson into, quote, our next great point guard, that Ian Jackson can do it? I do, because I inherently trust Rick Pitino to pretty much do, basically, I'll be honest. At this point, I pretty much trust Rick Pitino to do anything. He's that dude. He's that good. He's that kind of difference maker when he is your head coach. So one, I just trust Rick Pitino. Two, and I think this is equally important, Ian Jackson's going to have plenty of talent around him. Ian Jackson, as we discussed, think about the roster that he's going to have around him. He is going to have Josan Sanan, former basically five-star recruit, was a guy who was very good. Another guy who was very good as a freshman this past year at Arizona State was a guy who averaged 12 points per game, shot 37% from behind the three-point arc, and this was as a true freshman. He is coming to St. John's. Bryce Hopkins, who we've talked about a lot, was at Providence when he was healthy 3 seasons ago now, was an all Big East kind of guy, 15, almost 16 points per game and about 8.5 rebounds per game. Gets hurt in a season where he was trending as an all Big East guy. This year he comes back, is averaging 17 and 8 before he goes down with a separate injury that cost him the rest of the year. So you have Bryce Hopkins, you have Josan Sanan, and you have Zuby Ejiofor as well. We know how good Zuby Ejiofor was late in the season when as he got more comfortable as the starting center on that team. Averaged 15-8, but had 33-9 in a Big East tournament game against Marquette. And so I look at this roster. Listen, I think it's largely done. Now, I'll say this too. The other thing with Ian Jackson, I don't know that St. John's is done recruiting guards. One, we'll see, is there somebody else that enters the portal in the next 24 hours that St. John's can convince to become a member of the Red Storm? I think if the right guy entered the portal, I don't think that St. John's would refuse to take him. Let me put it that way. I think if the right guy entered the portal and was like, oh, that can be our point guard and Ian Jackson can play off the ball, I think Rick Pitino would take that guy. Two, and I think this is worth noting, they're also recruiting a Caden Lewis. Caden Lewis was the 4-star who was committed to Kentucky. He decommitted, looking for a bigger role than Kentucky would have been able to provide. I only bring it up because, listen, wouldn't it be a shocker to me if Caden Lewis took a visit to St. John's? You know, his dad has said some gushing things about Rick Pitino. And so is that a guy that you can pair in the backcourt with Ian Jackson? Is that a guy that can be your sixth man to start the year, that maybe by the middle to the end of the year could be the type of guy that could be a starting point guard in the Big East? It remains to be seen. One thing I will say, Ian Jackson, like I said, I think he's the biggest commit that Rick Pitino has gotten. He's got all Big East potential. He has a chance to be really good, and Rick Pitino does not slow down. All right, really quickly, do want to wrap with a team and a program. You know, probably about what? I would say probably 2 to 3 times a week. I have people asking me all sorts of stuff. By the way, I got a football notification. Apparently, producer Matt, this is amazing. We'll get to UConn in a second. This is amazing. Joey Aguilar, who was the UCLA starting quarterback, hits the portal, just committed to Tennessee. We could do the Joey Aguilar segment right now, but I think we'll stick with basketball. But yeah, Joey Aguilar, who was expected to be the UCLA quarterback, ends up entering the portal after Nico goes to UCLA. By the way, this has been a Nico-free show. Listen, I think we've said what we have to say about Nico at UCLA. I don't think it's going to work out very well. Whatever. But Joey Aguilar, who was expected to be the UCLA starter, is now headed to Tennessee. So the quarterback trade is complete. Yes, we're talking basketball portal, but the football portal is going on too. I'll say this. A lot of you have said, oh, we need to get midseason trades in college sports. Well, you just got an offseason trade because UCLA and Tennessee have swapped quarterbacks. I don't really have much else to add. Tennessee needed a guy that could be a starting capable guy, and they got one, and Joey Aguilar. Tennessee, I don't think to me was going to be defined by Nico anyway. So yeah. All right. No pause, but we'll momentarily pause so we can do the hard pivot back to basketball. All right. 3, 2, 1. All right. Do want to wrap the show with one other basketball topic. And frankly, it is a school that I get asked about a lot. I don't know if it's just because it's my social circle or it's because, frankly, we probably haven't talked about them a ton. But it's the UConn Huskies, okay? And by the way, I'll mention as I always do, we are recording at about 7 p.m. Eastern time. This is a topic that will change in the coming days. So I want to be clear. UConn fans, don't get mad at me. By the time you watch this may be old news or adjusted news or whatever. But UConn, the reason we haven't talked about them, it's quietly just been a really good offseason for them where there's not a lot of surprises, not a lot of unexpected news, and not a lot of real like crazy portal activity. This was an offseason where you knew if you were UConn, you needed to upgrade at the point guard position. Well, about 3 weeks ago, they went out and got Silas DeMary, the point guard or the lead guard. You know, he's not really a true point, but from Georgia, 13.5 points per game, about 3.5 assists per game. And that was before the Final Four, okay? Since then and around that time, UConn has gotten the return of Solo Ball. They've gotten the return of Jalen Stewart. They've gotten the return of Terrace Reed. They've gotten the return of Jaden Ross, 4 key players from last year's team. Probably the 4 guys that if you were Dan Hurley, you wanted to return the most. So you get 4 key returnees. You get your big portal commitment before the Final Four. And then last week you did add Malachi Smith, a guard from Dayton, 10 points per game, good 3-point shooter, whatever. But I don't know that that was like a segment that needed to be discussed on the show. Well, I bring it up because there was one piece of noteworthy news from the weekend that I think got a little bit overblown, but we'll discuss that now. And then we will discuss the big news, which is what is the future of Alex Karaban. So let's go ahead and discuss. And as always, make sure you're following our Torres on UConn page on Twitter, Torres on UConn, for all of your late breaking Huskies news. All right. So what was the news of the weekend that we need to discuss? The news of the weekend that we need to discuss, pretty straightforward. UConn got a decommitment from a fringe 5-star, high 4-star, low 4-star, low 5-star, depending on what recruiting service you look at. Kid by the name of Darius Adams. Okay. He was a McDonald's All-American, top 30 or so player nationally in basically every recruiting service. And he committed early in the fall cycle. Okay. And so he decommits on Saturday, and it feels like a big deal in the moment. And then you start to look at the roster. You start to look at things, how things come together, and you realize not only is it not a big deal, it probably in some degrees, in some ways in 2025 should have been expected. Silas DeMary is going to be your lead point guard, okay? Guard, Georgia, we just discussed 13 points per game. He's going to be the guy with the ball in his hands. Solo ball, all Big East player, 14 points per game, second leading scorer. He is coming back. He is going to start next year just like he did this year. You also have Braylon Mullins, 5-star, McDonald's All-American from the state of Indiana. Dan Hurley has publicly said this will be our next one and done. He's going to follow the trajectory of Liam McNeely. He is going to follow the trajectory of Steph Castle if everything goes well, and only be in stores 1 year. UConn fans brace for that because he is not a guy that's going to be here for year over year over year. Well, that's 3 guys right there. Then you added Malachi Smith, a 4th-year guard from Dayton, who played in some big games, including against UConn and Maui last year, 10 points per game, kind of in that 6th man, first guard off the bench. In a perfect world, it's like what you had from Hassan Diarra 2 seasons ago, when Hassan Diarra was the backup to Cam Spencer and Tristan Newton and whatever. And so all of a sudden you look at that, you have Jaden Ross, Jalen Stewart, and Furphy, the 4th kid committed on the wing. So you basically have 4 guards, 3 wings. Furphy's kind of a guard, wing, whatever. 7 guys. There's not that much opportunity. And if you're Darius Adams, you have to look at it and say, if I'm going to be the 5th guard off the bench, is it worth me going to UConn? Now, for some players, it might be. There might be a guy in the portal there that's willing to be the 5th guard off the bench and mostly be a practice player. But if you're a McDonald's All-American, I understand why you wouldn't want that role. You want to play early. You want to play often. And I'll say this, I think in this NIL era, you can't afford to waste a year, right? Like if you're Darius Adams and you go to UConn and you don't play, yeah, in theory, you could be the starter a year from now. But what if it doesn't work out? Now you got to transfer down. Now you lost a year of earning potential where next year he could go somewhere, be a starter, average, 13 points per game as a freshman. Now all of a sudden you're a $2 or $3 million player as a sophomore. So I don't blame him for deciding to leave. And I think fundamentally it doesn't really change UConn and who they are. What has become equally interesting about UConn to me, though, is what is going on and what is going to happen and what is the future of Alex Karaban, a multi-year starter, 2-time national champion. And again, I want to reiterate, it's 7:12 Eastern time. This stuff changes quickly. And if you are watching this and a decision has been made, don't yell and scream in the comments section. I understand that news changes quickly. But Alex Karaban is a guy that, I think is the last, he really is the last kind of interesting piece for UConn. If he were to come back, I think their roster is basically done. If not, it opens up a can of worms, which we're going to discuss in a minute. But a multi-year starter, like I said, 2-time national champion, and a guy that's, had a very interesting career, right? Was a key piece on 2 national championship teams. I don't think it's hyperbole to say you probably don't win both championships if you don't have Alex Karaban playing the way that he did. This year did average a career high 14 points per game, but also averaged a career low 34% shooting from 3. It sucks. He dealt with a concussion. I was told behind the scenes that I don't think he was right, basically. I think physically he just wasn't the same guy after that concussion. And so he struggled this past year. And so after the season ends, it becomes a conversation about what is he going to do? What is his future? Could he actually come back? He has 1 year of eligibility left. He redshirted during the 2021-2022 season, so he could come back for another year. Well, this weekend, I think we started to get some clarification. I think there was an interesting piece of news that also came out on Monday that we'll discuss in a minute. But the first thing was he was doing some sort of event in Connecticut, does a mini press conference where he basically says, like, look, my decision is coming here in the next couple days. And that makes sense because the NBA draft deadline is coming in the next couple days. I believe it's April 26th, which would be Friday into Saturday. So he's got to make a decision if he wants to enter the NBA draft. But there were two other things that happened over the last couple days that to me indicate that we probably know what's going to happen with Alex Karaban. One, he was seen at an airport. I believe it was probably at Bradley International in beautiful Windsor Locks, Connecticut. He was seen at an airport boarding a plane to Chicago. Producer Matt, if we have that tweet, you can pop it up. If not, it's not a huge deal. There he is. I don't know who Matt Souza is, but he says Alex Karaban boarding a plane to Chicago. What could be brewing? Eyeball emoji. Hashtag UConn, hashtag Huskies, hashtag one more year. I'll be real. It could mean a lot of things. I mean, one, I think UConn classes are pretty much over. I could be wrong on that. Graduation is usually around Mother's Day. Shout out, as a UConn alum, I know that I graduated Mother's Day many, many years ago. But what could it mean? Well, his agency's in Chicago. All the pre-draft stuff is in Chicago. And it could mean, by the way, that he is going to declare but leave the option open of returning. That is definitely a possibility. He did it last year. But what I also saw on Monday that I think is worth noting is this. Pop up the Sam Calhoun tweet. Sam Calhoun, grandson of the great Jim Calhoun, who might be getting on the pod here again soon. He tweeted out that 24/7 Sports, I had not seen this, but is reporting that UConn has reached out to Cal transfer Andrei Stojakovic. We talked about Andrei Stojakovic last week. Star. I mean, he is a stud. 17 points per game, and I think there are layers to his game that we haven't seen yet. But 17 points per game, all ACC guy at Cal. But I actually think his shooting is better than the numbers would indicate, and his playmaking/passing is better than it would indicate as well. Why do I bring it up? It's because, and by the way, shout out Matt for still having the stats from last week on Andrei Stojakovic. So one is this. First of all, remember, UConn did recruit him out of high school. I told you. There's a video somewhere on social you could find. I interviewed Stojakovic at the Pangos All-American camp in the summer of probably 2022. It would have been going into his senior year, so that sounds right, where he said he planned to take a visit to UConn. Did not end up happening, but the staff has known him for years, and obviously with that offense, it's a very European-based offense. His dad, Peja, was like one of the first great European players. I mean, Andrei Stojakovic would be like fit like a glove in that offense. Now, it's not to say that UConn is going to get him, or even that they're the favorite. I saw that Stojakovic is visiting visiting Illinois, this week. Illinois is obviously going to recruit him hard. Cal, they've said that it's not a 0% chance that he returns there, and other teams are going to get involved. North Carolina, I still think probably needs a guy or two. They have a history with him. We talked about Kentucky probably being done with their recruiting. I don't think that they would be a factor there. But the only point I'm trying to make is that if he does not return to Cal, there's going to be a long list. But why that's significant to me is because if, in fact, Stojakovic does end up let me backtrack. Independent of where Stojakovic goes, the fact that UConn has reached out means one of two things to me. Either one, they definitively know that Alex Karaban is going pro, or two, that Stojakovic would be some sort of insurance in case Alex Karaban decides, in fact, to go pro. So to me, what this says, UConn fans, if you're trying to get a bullet point, because Torres likes to talk, if you're just trying to get one quick bullet point out of this, it would be that basically it feels like the staff either feels like Alex Karaban is going to declare, or they definitively know that he is going to declare, and they're starting to work on contingency plans. I saw my buddy Mark Zanetto, Big East Energy, did put out that they've maybe started a dialogue with Darian Williams, a player who is testing the NBA draft waters from Texas Tech. So the point I'm trying to make is they are definitely working through contingency plans in case Alex Karaban ends up going pro. We have nothing official as of 7:18 Eastern time, but to me, this feels like one that eventually leads to Alex Karaban going pro. And UConn, to its credit, is working through alternatives. And I'll wrap by saying, if they were to somehow get Stojakovic to replace Alex Karaban, I think that would be a home run. I think even if they didn't, by the way, I weirdly think that UConn would be okay. I think Jalen Stewart, it just means a bigger role for him, and I think that would be a good thing. All right, I'll tell you what. I think it is time for us to get out of here. Producer Matt, I just see a lot of arguing in the chat. If you have a good question or two, let me know. But I think we'll probably go ahead and get out of here. I asked producer Matt if there's any good questions or just arguing. He said, brother, you have no idea. No, I do, because I saw people arguing an hour before we went on air, and that shows the type of show that we have, that people are fired up and are super passionate about the show. Apparently, nobody is saying very inappropriate things in the chat, which is very much on brand for him. Yes, producer Matt was sick last week. No, that doesn't mean that he was doing anything inappropriate at the Final Four, at least nothing that I saw. Really quick, I'll say this. I do see one thing that I want to talk about really quick. JJ and Paw Paw. So, Torres, get back to reporting. Tell us a scoop on Tyron Stokes. Is that dude Kansas bound? So, Tyron Stokes, really quick, if you missed it, we did a segment on him last week. We may do a segment on him later this week as well. Did see that he is set to visit Kentucky in mid-May. For people who don't know the story, great job, producer Matt. Had the graphic ready to go. For people who don't know, number one high school player in the class of 2026, originally from Kentucky. He's actually playing right down the street right now at Notre Dame Sherman Oaks, which is literally, I wouldn't say I could throw a rock and hit the school from where I now live, but I would say it's pretty darn close. Anyway, he visited Kansas this weekend. By the way, I love this. Only time I've ever seen this. He took his dog on his official visit, and his dog got involved in the photo shoot, so shout out Tyron Stokes. What I would tell you is this. He's originally from Kentucky. The thing that stands out to me, though, I said it last week. I don't believe he is going to play high school basketball next year. He will be 18 years old this year, which means he will be 19 and draft eligible in 2026 if he plays college basketball next year. So, to me, I don't really see the scenario where it doesn't make sense for him to play high school basketball. He's probably going to be a top 10 pick in 2026, but he's got to get to college this year. And so while it's interesting that he's visiting Kentucky, and I think Mark Pope should bring him on campus, if he is going to be if he's going to play college basketball next year, I don't think Kentucky would be the fit. I said it the other day. I think Kansas makes a lot of sense. They need dudes, and they need them in a hurry. And I think also Louisville would make a lot of sense as well. Kentucky, I think, is done unless they lose Otega-Oweh. Now, if you lose Otega-Oweh, he becomes an interesting guy, but I don't think you're going to lose Otega-Oweh. And so you already got, 13 scholarship players? I don't think you're bringing on a 14th guy for 2025, 2026. But again, you never know what's going to happen. And there's always a possibility he's in the 2026 class and he doesn't play college basketball next year. But I would expect him to play college basketball. I would say Kansas, Louisville are the favorites there. BYU, I don't believe is a factor because people have asked me about that. That's one where I think BYU is being linked because they want to drive up the price. Kentucky, he is taking a visit, so you never say never, but I don't think if he's playing college basketball next year, that one makes a ton of sense. All right, I think that's it. I think we're going to go ahead and get out of here. Do appreciate your support. If you're not subscribed to Aaron Torres Pod, make sure to do so. By the way, thank you for all of you. I hope everybody had a great Easter. Really kind of regret not doing a show on Sunday because we could have knocked out a lot of this stuff on Sunday and dove deeper into some other stuff on Monday's show. But we're going to get out of here. By the way, one other note that I think is interesting, Shelton Henderson, who was a 5-star in the class of 2025, was committed to Duke, decommitted last week. I said on Twitter, I said, he'll end up in Miami with Jay Lucas. That's exactly what happened. Miami quietly has a very nice roster. Cooper Flagg, by the way, did declare today. I didn't feel like it was necessary to talk about him because we all knew he was going to declare. Anyway, we're going to get out of here. If you're not subscribed to Aaron Torres Pod, make sure to do so. Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, Google Music, wherever you get your podcast, make sure to subscribe. Make sure to rate and review the show. Go ahead, give us a quick 5 stars. Let us know what you like, what you don't like, all that good stuff. Make sure you're following on social media at Aaron_Torres on Twitter, at Aaron Torres Pod on Instagram, Aaron Torres Podcast Questions at gmail.com, Aaron Torres Podcast Questions at gmail.com. All for today's show. By the way, this TV, You want your logo there. You want to reach millions of people in 2025. You want to reach out to me, Aaron Torres, podcastquestions@gmail.com. Let's get your logo on this TV. As I said, we have reached well over 1 million people since the start of March, and we're going to reach millions more before the end of the year. If you work at one of those Kentucky bourbon distilleries, by the way, Tyson Chicken, you want to shout out? You want to be part of the Aaron Torres pod? That's fine. We love the Tyson Chicken people here. We love the Walmart people here as well. Any company logo here, Aaron Torres pod. Time for me to go. Time for me to get out of here. Appreciate everybody's support. Time to go. Shout out to Torrent Craig. Shout out to Rachel, who hates my voice. Shout out to JJ Redick, you F-head. How about JJ Redick losing, getting smoked in game 1 of the playoffs on Saturday night? All for today's show. Maybe back tonight, maybe back Wednesday, or maybe back Tuesday, maybe back Wednesday. We'll be back soon, though.